let go of her arm. Nobody moved for a full second. That kind of voice had that effect on a room. Chad Warwick's fingers were still wrapped around Sadie Whitmore's wrist. His production crew had gone quiet. The 3 camera operators stood exactly as they were, lenses angled toward the floor, instinctively trying to become smaller. Sadie had already said no. She had said it twice, politely the first time, and without ambiguity the second. Chad had laughed both times and reached for her anyway, because Chad Warwick had spent 11 seasons on cable television learning that people said no until a camera appeared, and then they changed their minds. He was currently revising that assumption. The man standing 8 feet away hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved. He was simply watching Chad with the focused, untroubled patience of someone who had already made a decision and was generously allowing the other party a moment to catch up. Chad let go. 22 days earlier, Sadie Whitmore had been invisible. She had worked very hard at it. Being a bookkeeper at Casentino wasn't exactly a dream career. It was, however, a practical one. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a renovated building on the north side of downtown, all dark wood and low lighting and servers, who moved like they'd been choreographed. The food was genuinely excellent. The financials were not Sadie's problem in any structural sense. Her job was to keep the legitimate numbers clean, which she did, and to ask her no questions about the other kind, which she also did. She had been doing this for 3 years without incident, which was more than she could say for most things in her life. Her office was the size of a large closet. She kept it tidy because the alternative was suffocating. She knew exactly 3 people by name: Bia, the head server who sometimes left a plate of something by her door at the end of lunch service; Pete from receiving, who left receipts in approximate chronological order; and Renner, the quiet man who came in on the 1st of every month, reviewed a folder she left on the corner of her desk, and nodded once before leaving. She had never learned Renner's last name. She had not asked. She was, in short, exactly the kind of person who never got noticed. She had built that carefully over a long time. Then a man started coming in every Tuesday and Thursday at noon and sitting at table 9. His name, according to the reservation, was Aaron Burns. He was tall, dark-suited, expensive in the way that didn't announce itself, and he ordered with the quiet precision of someone who knew exactly what he wanted and found the menu a formality. He sat alone. He never looked at his phone. He wrote occasionally in a small leather notebook with a pen that probably cost more than Sadie's car payment. Sadie noticed him the way she noticed most things, not because she was looking, but because her brain filed details automatically, the same way it filed invoice discrepancies and mismatched receipts. He came in hungry, ate slowly, and left unhurried. He tipped generously without making it a gesture. She noticed him for 2 weeks before he noticed her. Or rather, before he made it apparent. She had been carrying a stack of vendor files toward the back hallway when she passed table 9 at the wrong moment, and he glanced up from his notebook. Not startled, just watching, the way a person watched when they recognized something interesting. "The branzino," he said. Sadie stopped. "I'm sorry. I've had it 3 times. Something's wrong with the preparation this week." She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them, apparently, felt any particular need to explain why a bookkeeper would have an opinion on branzino preparation, or why a customer would address said opinion to a random woman carrying folders. "They switched olive oil suppliers," Sadie said, 2 weeks ago. "The new one has a higher smoke point. It's affecting the sear." Aaron Burns studied her for a moment. "You taste the food." "I eat lunch here. It's a professional courtesy." "And you noticed the oil change." "I noticed the invoices changed. The taste was a logical consequence." She shifted the folders under her arm. "If it bothers you, order the lamb. The preparation hasn't changed." He looked down at the menu, then back up at her. "What's your name?" "Sadie." She kept walking. She expected that to be the end of it. It wasn't. The following Tuesday, he was back at table 9. When she passed with the afternoon deposit folder, he said, without looking up from his notebook, "The lamb was better." "I know. You weren't wrong about the oil. I'm rarely wrong about things I've already checked." He looked up then. Not quite a smile, but something in the direction of one. Confidence. "Arithmetic," she said. "Same principle." She kept walking. He kept coming back. Their conversations developed the way glaciers moved, slowly, incrementally, without announcing themselves. He asked for her recommendation on the specials. She gave it, briefly, with qualifications. He critiqued her choices afterward with the kind of specificity that was either insufferable or interesting, depending on your threshold for detail. She found it interesting, which annoyed her somewhat. "The risotto was overworked," he said one Thursday, setting down his fork. "It was slightly stiff," Sadie allowed. "More than slightly." M. Gray would call it earnest but anxious, which is the polite version of overworked. Something shifted in his expression, very small. She almost missed it. "You read M. Gray," he said. "I have the last 4 cookbooks." She picked up a stray receipt that had fallen from her folder, the column 2. "Every week." And M. Gray is generally right about texture and usually wrong about presentation. The soufflé column from last spring was a disaster. 3 pages defending a dish that only works perfectly at altitude, with specific humidity, using exactly one brand of European butter that you can't reliably source in most of the country. She paused. Accurate criticism, completely useless advice. Aaron Burns considered this. M. Gray might argue the standard should be the goal, not the accommodation. M. Gray can argue whatever they like from their test kitchen. She tucked the receipt into the folder. "The rest of us have to work with the ingredients we can actually get." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a fair point." "I know." He made a note in his leather notebook. She didn't ask what it said. Bea found the whole thing endlessly fascinating. She expressed this during the 20 minutes at the end of Friday's service, when the front of house wound down, and Sadie sometimes came out for the tail end of staff meal. "He's here twice a week," Bea said, in the tone of someone presenting evidence. "Lots of people come twice a week. He asks which days you're in the office." Sadie put down her fork. "He does not." Bea looked serene. "He asked me on Tuesday, casually, like he was asking about parking." Sadie thought about this. She didn't have a useful response, so she ate her pasta instead. "He's very handsome," Bea offered. "He's opinionated about cooking technique. Those aren't mutually exclusive." He wrote down something I said about soufflés. Bea leaned forward. "Sadie." In a leather notebook. "Sadie." "I'm just saying it was a strange thing to write down." Bea leaned back, satisfied in the way of someone who had already concluded the argument 3 exchanges earlier. "Very strange," she agreed. The event had been scheduled for weeks. Chad Warwick. 11 seasons, 2 Emmys, a cookbook that had spent 14 weeks on the bestseller list, was doing a promotional shoot at Casentino for a network piece on the city's food scene. The restaurant had agreed to 2 hours on a Saturday morning before service. Sadie had been informed of this the way she was informed of most things. A note on the shared calendar, and an implication that she should stay out of the way. She had planned to. She was in fact in the back hallway heading toward her office, with a stack of quarterly reports, when Chad's producer spotted her and decided that a real restaurant employee would add authenticity to the segment. "I'm the bookkeeper," Sadie said. "Perfect," the producer said, already moving. "I don't work in the kitchen." "Even better, it's a contrast thing." No, thank you. The producer paused, recalibrated, and smiled the smile of someone who had done this many times. Just 2 minutes. Chad's very natural on camera. He'll put you at ease. No, thank you. Chad himself materialized at that point, all easy confidence and practiced warmth, and suggested, once, jovially, with a camera already rolling, that she step into the frame for a quick shot. Nothing serious. Just a friendly moment. Great for the segment. She said no. He laughed and said something about not being shy, which she wasn't, and reached for her wrist. And that was when Aaron Burns said, from somewhere behind the camera crew, "Let go of her arm." Everyone froze. Chad looked toward the voice. His expression shifted through several stages. Irritation, recalculation, recognition of something he hadn't accounted for. Sadie didn't need to look. She already knew the voice. Chad's fingers opened. He stepped back with his hands raised, a performed gesture of innocence. "Hey, we're just..." "You're done." Not loudly, the way a conclusion sounds when it isn't up for debate. "Pack the equipment. Take the crew. Leave the way you came in." Chad opened his mouth. One of his producers touched his arm. The cameras went down. Within 4 minutes, the entire production had retreated through the front entrance, with the efficient silence of people who understood when a situation had changed irrevocably. Sadie waited until the door closed. Then she turned around. "I didn't need that," she said. Aaron stood near the window with his hands in his coat pockets, watching her, with the same unhurried attention he gave the menu. "I know. I was handling it." "You had handled it." He wasn't listening. "So you decided to handle it instead." "I decided to enforce the answer you had already given." He tilted his head slightly. "There's a distinction." Sadie looked at him for a long moment. She was good at reading people. It was the same skill as reading numbers, really. And what she read in his expression right now was not satisfaction or performative heroism. It was something quieter. The specific calm of a person who had done the necessary thing and was waiting to see if she agreed it had been necessary. She wasn't entirely sure she did. "Next time," she said, "let me finish first." The corner of his mouth moved just barely. Noted. She found out who he was 2 hours later. She was in her office with the quarterly reports, trying to concentrate, when Bea appeared in the doorway, with the expression she reserved for information she was uncertain about delivering. "So," Bea said, "whatever it is, say it plainly. Someone in the kitchen mentioned that Mr. Fallon was here this morning." Sadie looked up from the spreadsheet. "Fallon." "Yes. Ambrose Fallon." Bea said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Sadie thought about the Table 9 reservation. Aaron Burns. She thought about the monthly folder Renner collected. She thought about the questions she had specifically trained herself never to ask. She opened her laptop. She typed the name. The search returned results immediately. Business profiles, news articles, photographs. She looked at one photograph for a long time. She closed the laptop. "Bea," she said. "Yes." "Thank you." Bea left without another word. Sadie sat very still for approximately 7 minutes. She was good at sitting still. She did some of her best thinking there. Then she noticed the package on the corner of her desk, the one she had brought in that morning and hadn't opened yet. Brown paper, a press sticker. The new M. Gray cookbook. She had pre-ordered it 4 months ago after the column about braised short ribs, which had been, in her professional opinion, M. Gray's finest piece of writing in 2 years. She opened it. She read the dedication. For the rooms that look like one thing and mean another, and the people who notice. She stopped. She turned to the author page. M. Gray was listed as anonymous, as always. No photograph, no biography beyond a single line. M. Gray writes about food from an undisclosed location. She thought about a man in a corner booth writing in a leather notebook. She thought about the specific way he had described the risotto. Not as a diner would, but as someone who understood exactly what had gone wrong, and why, at a technical level that required more than enthusiasm. She thought about what he had said about the soufflé column. M. Gray might argue the standard should be the goal. Not I read that, M. Gray thinks. Not I heard somewhere, M. Gray might argue. Present tense, considered, first person adjacent. She set the book down very carefully on the edge of the desk. Then she picked up her phone and called the one number she had for him, the extension he had given her 2 weeks ago, for if the Tuesday fish ever improves. He answered on the second ring. I read the dedication, she said. A pause. Not the pause of someone confused, the pause of someone who had been waiting for this particular phone call and was deciding how to meet it. Sadie, he said, I'm not asking you to explain everything over the phone. She looked at the cookbook cover, but I am going to need you to come in. Another pause. When? Now would be fine. He came in through the back entrance, which told her something. He sat across from her in the single chair on the other side of her desk, which barely fit him, and he looked at her with the same level attention he always had. No more guarded than usual, which was to say very, which she now understood differently. She asked him 3 questions. She asked them in the order that made logical sense. How long have you owned this restaurant? 8 years. How long have you been writing as M. Gray? 11. Why the name? He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, thinking, because food critics who are known quantities stop getting real food. Restaurants perform for them. I wanted to eat what everyone else ate. Sadie thought about that, and the other reason. His expression shifted slightly. The business I run doesn't usually accommodate public writing under my name. The combination would have been, he searched for the word, complicated. So you separated them. Yes. She looked at the cookbook on her desk. The soufflé column was still wrong. Something in him relaxed, almost imperceptibly. The butter saucing has improved in the last year. Write a correction, then. I might. She looked at him for a long moment. He was, she had to admit, the same person who had been sitting at table 9 for 3 weeks. He had not invented himself. He had simply introduced parts of himself in a specific order and omitted the rest. She understood the impulse. She was not sure she forgave it. I need to think, she said. He nodded. He didn't ask how long. He didn't offer assurances or explanations dressed as apologies. He simply stood up, set something on the corner of her desk, a small paper packet of the loose tea she had mentioned once, in passing, weeks ago, that she couldn't find anywhere locally, and walked out. 3 weeks passed. He did not come to the restaurant. He did not call. No messages arrived. No information was routed through Renner. Casentino continued on exactly as it always had, with good food and complicated money and beer leaving plates by Sadie's door every Friday. The M. Gray column published on its usual schedule. Sadie read it every week. The week after their conversation, it covered a small dim-sum restaurant 2 hours north. The week after that, a diner near the waterfront with exceptional pie and unreliable service. The 4th week, the column opened like this. There is a restaurant, I will not name it, for reasons that belong to me, where the person most qualified to review the food is not in the kitchen and not in the dining room. She works in a back office no larger than a sensible pantry, and she tastes every dish that reaches the table not as a critic, but as someone who cares whether the restaurant is honest. She told me once that the new olive oil was ruining the branzino. She was right before I had finished the sentence. I have been thinking about that particular accuracy ever since. Sadie read it twice, sitting at her desk on a Thursday morning, with her coffee going cold beside the keyboard. Then she called Bea in. Bea read it over her shoulder in silence. "Well," Bea said. "Yes," Sadie said. "That's a thing. It is a thing." Bea went back to the dining room. Sadie sat with the column for another few minutes. Then she got up, put on her coat, and walked out of the office for the first time in the middle of a workday in 3 years. His building was downtown, 12 blocks from the restaurant. It was the kind of building that looked expensive in the way Aaron Burns had looked expensive, without announcing itself, which somehow made it louder. The lobby had a single security desk, manned by a man who looked at Sadie with the polite wariness of someone accustomed to unexpected arrivals. She gave her name. She said she was here to see Ambrose Fallon. "A 40-second wait, then. He's expecting you." She took the elevator to the 14th floor. The door at the end of the hall opened before she knocked. He was in a different suit today, darker, and he looked as though he had been working for hours. He stepped back to let her in. She stepped in. The office was large and orderly, and one entire wall was books. She noticed, without being surprised, that several M. Gray cookbooks were spine out on the 3rd shelf. She noticed also a draft manuscript on the corner of the desk, printed, with handwritten corrections in the margins. She did not go and read the corrections. She wanted to, which she acknowledged internally as a separate matter. "You wrote about the olive oil," she said. "I did." "You didn't use my name." "No." She looked at him. "Why not?" "Because the column is mine. The observation was yours. Those are different things." She thought about that for a moment. "That's actually a reasonable answer. I have them occasionally." "M. Gray has them occasionally," she said. Aaron Burns deflected everything. He accepted that without argument. She was realizing, very good at accepting things that were accurate. It was almost disarming. "I'm not here because the column was a gesture," she said. "I'm here because I want to have one conversation that starts from the actual beginning. No reservation name, no pen name, no questions I wasn't supposed to ask." "All right. That means you answer them." "All right," he said again. Same word, different weight. She sat down. He sat across from her. And for the first time since a man at table 9 had mentioned Branzino on a Tuesday 3 months ago, they talked without any borrowed names between them. It was not, as it turned out, a short conversation. They talked for 2 hours. About the restaurant, about the books, about the city and her work and his, and the considerable inconvenience of maintaining 2 identities when one of them had strong opinions about soufflé humidity. She argued with him about the short rib column. He defended it, then revised his defense, then conceded a point she'd made about brazing time with the quiet attention of someone filing a correction internally. She did not forgive him by the time she left. She told him so, which he seemed to appreciate. She came back the following week, and the week after. The M. Gray column ran its correction about the soufflé 2 months later. It was half a page, precise, and included a note about butter availability that was, Sadie thought, slightly better than she would have written herself. Slightly. She told him so at dinner, a restaurant that neither of them owned or reviewed, neutral ground, crowded enough that no one was paying attention to them. He said he had incorporated her notes. She said she had only sent 4 emails. He said 4 had been sufficient. She looked at him across the table. He was, she had concluded, the same man who had been showing up at table 9 for 3 weeks before she knew his actual name. He was not simpler or more complicated than she had understood him to be. He was, mostly, exactly what she had already read. She reached for her water glass. "The Branzino's better, by the way. They found a new supplier." "I know," he said. "I recommended them." She put down her glass. "Of course you did." It's my restaurant. It is technically your restaurant. It is actually my restaurant. She laughed. Really laughed. The way you did when something struck you as genuinely funny rather than politely so. He watched her with an expression she had only seen on him a few times, still and unguarded, the look of a man who wasn't managing anything for a moment. She had decided quietly that she liked that expression best. Casentino's financials remained Sadie's problem in the narrow and specific way they had always been. That did not change. Her office changed slightly. It was no longer the size of a large closet, a fact that had happened without announcement, and which she had accepted without comment, because the new one had a window, and the window faced east and the morning light was extremely good. Bea continued to leave plates by the door on Fridays. She continued to ask no questions. She continued to look satisfied every time Sadie came out to staff meal without explaining where she'd been, which Bea appeared to find entirely satisfying as a data point on its own. Renner continued his first-of-the-month visits. He did not acknowledge the M. Gray cookbooks that had appeared on Sadie's shelf. He left exactly as he always had, with a single nod which Sadie had come to understand was his version of an extensive character reference. Some months later, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, Ambrose came in through the back. Still his preferred entrance, old habits being what they were, and sat down across from her desk with 2 cups of coffee and a draft manuscript she could tell, from the weight of the pages, was the new column. "I need a second opinion," he said. She took the draft. She read it. She made 4 notes in the margin. He read the notes. "The second one's wrong," he said. "The second one's right, and you know it." A pause. "The third one's right. All 4 are right." He looked at her over his coffee cup. 3 of them. Sadie uncapped her pen. "We'll revisit the second one when the column runs, and I am demonstrably correct." "You seem very confident." "Ambrose," she said, with the patience of someone who had been correct about this particular person from the beginning and had simply needed the evidence to catch up. "I have been right about the food in this restaurant for 3 years. I was right about the olive oil. I was right about the soufflé column. I am right about the second note." He considered this for a moment. "Fine," he said. She made a small mark in the margin. He watched her work with an expression she'd come to recognize. The particular stillness of a man who had spent a very long time deciding exactly how much of himself to show the world, and was still slowly recalculating what the number ought to be. She didn't rush him. She returned to the draft. Outside, the Thursday lunch crowd was arriving, chairs scraped on hardwood, the low hum of a room filling up. Good food, complicated money. And a woman in an office with a window who had been invisible for 3 years, right up until the moment she stopped being convenient to ignore. Ambrose Fallon had built his entire life on controlling what people knew about him. He had kept the names separate, and the rooms divided, and the books balanced in every sense of the word. Then a bookkeeper with a talent for accurate arithmetic had looked at the invoices, looked at the column, looked at him, and told him plainly where all 3 of them were wrong. He had never been corrected by someone who wasn't afraid of him. He had spent considerable time, afterward, trying to determine why he found it so much easier to breathe.